Hi, vacation rental owner or manager. Why do some vacation rentals feel expensive the second you walk in, while others feel cheap? It usually comes down to luxury perception. And the good news, you don't always need to spend more money to create that feeling of luxury. In this episode, we're breaking down 5 common design mistakes that can make your STR look cheap and how to fix them. Hi, vacation rental owner. Welcome to Step Up Your STR, which is all about strategic decorating that drives more bookings and revenue in your vacation rental business. I'm Kara, and I've designed dozens of STRs, all of which charge in the top 10% of their area competitors. Now, have you ever walked into an STR and thought, oh, okay, well, here we are. Here's this place. Or maybe you've had the opposite experience. You walk into the property and immediately think, wow, this place feels really great, really elevated. And maybe you couldn't even tell exactly why. The furniture isn't dramatically more expensive, the property isn't enormous, and maybe there aren't marble countertops everywhere or designer furniture in every room, but somehow it does feel elevated. It feels intentional and like it's worth more. It feels luxury. I recently analyzed 250 vacation rentals across 10 markets throughout the United States, and there were 3 design elements that strongly correlate with higher nightly rates. And I'll try to put up a table on the screen. Luxury perception was one of those top 3 design characteristics. Now, I want to be really clear about what this does and does not mean. My study does not prove that changing design elements will automatically cause your ADR to increase by a certain amount. But there is correlation. When you're studying and going through hundreds of properties and you keep seeing certain characteristics show up again and again among those stronger performing properties, I think those patterns are worth paying attention to. Actually, I think it's really exciting. Luxury perception was one of those patterns. But there are a lot of common issues that look the opposite of luxury. And that's what we'll talk about today, plus how to fix them. In the last podcast, we talked about how your decor is the first sales conversation that your listing has with a potential guest. We talked about how guests book with their eyes first. But getting someone to stop the scroll is only the first step. Once you've gotten their attention, your property has another job to do. It has to communicate that your space is worth what you're charging. It has to make the guests think this looks worth it. And that response of this place looks worth it is luxury perception. It's basically how valuable a place looks, elevated and desirable it looks to a potential guest. It doesn't necessarily mean expensive furniture. In fact, I'm kind of the opposite of expensive furniture. I do not like having to pay more than a piece of furniture is worth. And I definitely don't mean that every STR needs to look like a luxury hotel. Luxury perception is more about the guest getting what they think they're getting. Because here's the thing, your guests don't see your furniture receipts. They don't see what you paid. They only see the finished product. They see how everything works together in the photos. And from that, they make a judgment. They might think, oh, this feels kind of cheap. Or this looks like a place I would happily pay $1,000 a night for. That's luxury perception. So I want to encourage you to stop thinking about design only in terms of what your furniture costs and start thinking about what your design communicates. Because you can spend a lot of money and still create a low perception of value. Or you can spend your money strategically with quite a small budget, actually, and create a much stronger perception of luxury if you know what you're doing. So let's talk about those 5 mistakes, how they can get in the way, and how to fix them. Mistake number 1, buying cheap where you should invest. Now, this is an important distinction. I'm not saying you should go out and buy an expensive version of everything. I'm saying there are certain things where high quality matters because the guest actually experiences them. Think about a mattress. It might not be the most exciting thing to photograph, but your guest is going to sleep on it for hours every night. So they're going to know whether it's comfortable. Or think about your sofa. You could have the most beautiful living room in the world, but if your sofa is hard or uncomfortable or impossible to relax on, then you've created a disconnect between what you're promising visually and what you're actually delivering physically. So when I talk about investing, I'm talking about being strategic. Invest in the things guests are going to spend significant time using. That includes beds, mattresses, sofas, dining chairs, sometimes outdoor furniture, and actually silverware and knobs as well. Owners rarely think of those, but they can communicate quality and luxury fast. You want to invest in anything where comfort and quality directly affect the guest experience because that is strategic. That's strategic design. Remember, your decor is the first salesperson that somebody will meet. The design in your listing photos is making a promise, and then the guest experience needs to deliver on that promise in order for you to get good reviews. You don't want your design to say, this is a premium experience, and then give your guests a cheap, uncomfortable mattress when they arrive at your place. So the visual promise and the experience, the physical experience should match. Mistake number 2, buying things as you go along without a design plan. This one is incredibly common. It even happens to me. And so I really do understand why it happens. Here's what the most common scenario is that I see for STR owners. You buy the property and you know you need furniture. So you start shopping. You find a sofa and some chairs and a piece of art. And then the next week you go to look for a coffee table. And then maybe a month after that, you realize that a rug would be great. So you get that. And then maybe a couple weeks later, you see some lamps and realize, oh yeah, lamps would be good. Every individual thing might look fine on its own, but if you didn't have a plan to follow, in 4 months, you're going to stand back and probably think nothing goes together. The sofa is one style, the rug is another. The artwork doesn't really relate to anything. The colors are all over the place. There isn't a cohesive look at all to the room. It's just stuff. This is one of the biggest differences between furnishing a property and designing a vacation rental correctly. Furnishing it means I need something here. Designing it correctly means what belongs here and why. The smartest way is to have a plan before you start buying. You need to know a lot of things. What is the personality of this property? What colors should be used? What are the major furniture pieces that go in this room? Where is the focal point? Where should we invest more? Where can we save? What do we want the guests to feel? And the questions go on and on. Design really is complicated, but when you have that good plan from the beginning, you can make individual purchasing decisions in phases if you need to. You can space out those purchases and they'll still enhance the look of the whole room. I want to stop here and give a shameless plug. I do e-design for STR owners from everywhere. You would get a detailed plan with all the information you need to set up your space as if I were there doing it for you. You can find a link to e-design, that info in the description. Okay, back to the episode. Without a plan, every purchase is being judged in isolation. You're asking, do I like this? But with a plan, the question becomes, oh, does this support the design? Yes. This plan say that it will, and it does. It's a completely different way of shopping because one of the things that makes a space feel expensive is intentionality. You look at a really well-designed room and you get the sense that everything belongs. It doesn't necessarily match. In fact, things in a really well-designed space rarely match exactly, but it does look like somebody made really good and wise decisions. That's what I want your guests to feel. Someone designed this. I don't want them to feel like, oh, here's some stuff in this room and we can use it. Mistake number 3 is going all neutral. Now, I've talked a lot about how it is great to use color in your STR. So I want to be clear that I'm not anti-neutral. I actually love neutral spaces. They can be so timeless and restful and sophisticated. Calming Colors like restful neutral colors can be a fantastic foundation for an STR. The problem is when everything is neutral and there's no contrast. Because if everything is beige or everything is gray and your sofa is soft and neutral and your artwork is and your accessories are soft and neutral, you end up with a room that's visually flat. And remember, your room is going to be seen in a photograph before it's experienced in person. So contrast is a great solution if you have an all neutral backdrop. Contrast helps photographs stand out online. It helps your eyes move around a room and creates visual interest. It doesn't mean that you suddenly need to paint a wall bright orange. There are lots of sophisticated ways to create contrast. For example, black and white. You can have a mostly neutral room and introduce some black with like a lamp, a couple of pieces of furniture, some black hardware on a cabinet, picture frames. Another combination that I love for contrast is old and new. Maybe you have a beautiful vintage item and then you hang a really cool contemporary light fixture overhead. Or maybe some traditional artwork with contemporary furniture. The tension between old and new creates interest. Another way to create contrast is with neutral plus a few strong colors. Not every color in the rainbow, that will give you the Skittles effect, but you can have a beautiful neutral room and then bring in some intentional colors, some of those hits of color, maybe like a deep green sofa or a fuchsia coffee table or a really cheerful yellow throw. The point isn't to make the whole room colorful, but it's to give the eye something to notice. This is where I think STR owners can sometimes get stuck. They're afraid of making a mistake, so they make everything safe, quote unquote safe. But safe is typically forgettable. We don't want your STR to be forgettable. I'm not saying stop using neutrals, but I am saying don't use all neutral. Use some contrast intentionally. Mistake number 4, using generic art. Now, before I talk about this one, I want to make another distinction. I'm not saying that every accessory or even every piece of art in your STR needs to be unique and make a statement. There are fantastic affordable accessories everywhere. You don't need to spend $500 on a vase or find, the most amazing rug that's from Turkey. You can find great things that are mass produced. There are a lot of good things you can choose from that are good quality. You just need to know what you're looking for. Now, artwork in particular is one of the easiest opportunities that you have to give your property personality. And so often I see artwork that is there basically because it's on a blank wall. There's a blank wall, so you put up something that looks like art. I want to share a few art guidelines. If you have a big blank wall, you do need a big piece of art. But don't just ask yourself, what's going to fit here? Instead, ask, what should this wall say? Because your artwork can communicate so much. It can communicate the destination, the personality of your property. It can become the room's focal point. And a focal point is really important in interior design. Certainly, art can reinforce your color palette. Art can even become part of the story of your place that guests will remember. Like I said, not every piece has to be custom or expensive, but your main art pieces should be intentional because generic art is one of those things that really can make an otherwise attractive STR feel like it came straight out of a big box store. It doesn't tell me anything. So I want to give you 2 specific examples of very generic art. One is the Eiffel Tower, and one is the New York City skyline. If you don't live in New York City, if your STR is not in New York City, or if it is not in Paris, don't use the Eiffel Tower or the New York City skyline. It's just way overdone, those 2 things. Those do not give a guest a reason to remember your place. And when you're competing against dozens of other properties, personality matters, and art can get you there. Mistake number 5, not following basic design rules. This is one of the reasons I think professional design expertise can make such a big difference. Sometimes the owner actually has bought some pretty good stuff. The sofa is nice, the chairs are comfy, they have some really good artwork, and yet the room still doesn't look right. Why? Because design isn't just what you buy, it's what you do with what you buy. Scale matters, proportion matters. Scale and proportion have to do with how big the pieces are in relation to each other and in relation to the room. Spacing matters, how far apart things are placed from each other. Balance matters. Balance is when I'll just give you an example of an imbalanced room. If you have a big cabinet and it's a dark wood, and then you have a dark TV, and then maybe some dark artwork all on this wall, and then you don't have anything over on this side of the room, that will feel heavy to one side. So that's an imbalanced room. Balance matters. Traffic flow matters, how people walk through a room. And that's just a few of the design rules that I'm talking about. But all of these things can completely change how a room feels. It's really common to hang artwork too high. It's also really common to put furniture in an arrangement that makes conversation difficult or impossible. Another common problem is pushing everything against the wall because people will think that makes the room feel bigger, but it actually makes the room feel worse. Too short curtains, curtains that come off the floor more than a quarter of an inch, that's too short. And that's another common issue. Using too many pieces of furniture in a room or too few. I could go on and on. These are all basic design principles, and they are really important. They're especially important in your vacation rental because the room isn't just being experienced in person. It's not like you're just there using the space. It's being photographed. Furniture that is technically functional can still create a terrible photograph. You might have a pretty nice living room, but if the furniture arrangement doesn't create a natural and strong composition, the listing photo won't communicate what the room actually has going for it. So that's why I encourage people to ask, does this piece work in this room? Anything that you're going to put in, does it work along with everything else that's in the room? That's the difference between collecting things and just putting stuff into a space and actually creating a really nice place where people can feel comfortable and happy. Okay, let's look at these 5 mistakes again, just briefly. They are buying cheap where you should invest. That can hurt the guest experience. It typically does hurt the guest experience. Number 2, buying things as you go can create a disconnected space when you don't have a plan. Going all neutral can make a room feel visually and look visually flat. Generic art can make a property feel like it has no personality. And poor furniture arrangements can make even beautiful items look like they're just totally wrong. None of these things necessarily means you've done something dramatically wrong, but several of them happening together, that's what I most often see. And that creates a property that feels less valuable than it actually is. And that's the key. Luxury perception is about the whole picture. Does it feel elevated and worth the price? And here's something I really want STR owners to understand. Please don't let your takeaway be that I'm saying you should spend more money. That's not the message I want to send. In fact, one of the things that I love most about good design is that it can make a budget work harder. An STR designer's job is not to make you spend more. It's to help you spend better. If you have $10,000 to furnish your room, I don't want you to spend that $10,000 randomly. I want you to hone in on where will that $10,000 make the biggest difference? What will make the property more memorable? What will improve guest experience? Those questions matter so much, and $10,000 can go a long way if you know what you're doing. Spending that decorating budget wisely is making decisions on what will create the strongest overall result for you and your guests. All right, I want to give you a solid takeaway. So here's something you can do with your own STR. Open your listing and ask yourself, does my property look intentional? Does everything look like it belongs together? Does it photograph well? And then here's a big question. If I didn't know how much this property costs to furnish, what would I assume it costs? That's an interesting question because that's what your potential guest is doing, even if it's subconsciously. They don't know your budget, but they are forming a perception. And that perception is influencing whether they're going to book your place or somebody else's. This is why I keep saying that your decor isn't decorating, it's marketing. It is communicating before you ever get a chance to make your case in words. And if the design is communicating cheap, it doesn't matter if you actually spent a lot of money. Guests don't see the money, they see the result. That's the power of design. And that's why I think our owners should stop thinking about design in terms of, as the finishing touch, and instead thinking about it as part of their sales strategy. So that's your homework. Go look at your listing tonight and ask yourself, does my property look worth what I'm charging? If you think it could use some zhuzhing up, I want to let you know that I have a whole page full of free resources on my website. You can check it out. It's all about designing a successful STR. A lot of tips and tricks and formulas you can follow, and that'll be linked in the description. Next time, we're going to talk about something that I think is one of the biggest missing opportunities in STR design, and that is why your decor might be beautiful and expensive and still forgettable. Today, we talked about luxury perception. Next time, we'll talk about being memorable. Thank you so much for joining in today. It has been a pleasure, and I hope that you can have some takeaways from this to increase the luxury perception of your property. I look forward to talking again next time.